I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was just grabbing a file I forgot on the nightstand. But then I froze in place, barefoot, still holding my car keys when I heard my husband say, "What if she files for divorce and disappears to Spain? We'll lose everything." And then his mother, the woman I'd spent 4 years of my life tiptoeing around, calmly replied, "That's why we need to make sure she's declared legally incompetent. I already spoke to someone. We'll put her somewhere quiet, sign the papers for her, and that inheritance becomes ours." My heart didn't just break. It crumbled, silently, completely. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I slipped out of the apartment like a ghost, still hearing their voices echoing behind me. But I guess this story doesn't begin in betrayal. Not really. To understand why I stood there frozen, not screaming or storming in, you have to know where I came from. You have to know what it's like to grow up believing you are disposable. When I was 8, my mother left. No explanation. One day, she kissed my cheek and said she had errands to run. She never came back. After that, everything fell apart. My father drank. Not just occasionally. He sank into it like it was a second home. He'd sit in the dark, whispering bitter things to himself, then shout them at me or my grandmother when he got angry enough. It was always our fault. Always. My grandmother, sweet and quiet, tried to hold things together. She'd stroke my hair and say, "It's not your fault, Natalie. You're a good girl. Your mother, your father, they're the broken ones." But even her voice couldn't drown out the crashes, the accusations, the long weeks when my dad would disappear on a bender and return with bruises and guilt that turned into rage. When I was 12, he drank himself into a hospital bed and never came out. So it was just me and Grandma. And somehow that was better. I gave up a lot to stay with her. College was supposed to be in the city, but we lived in a tiny village up north, and commuting was impossible. She couldn't be alone, not at her age. So I worked. I delivered mail. I made tea. I sat with her in the evenings and watched old movies from the 50s while she fell asleep in her armchair. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. Then she passed. Quietly. No warning. I was 20 and once again completely alone. I packed everything into 2 suitcases and moved to Lansing. I got into a tourism program, my childhood dream. Not because I'd traveled. I hadn't even left the state. But I wanted to know what the rest of the world looked like. I wanted to believe it was out there, waiting for me. I graduated with honors and got a job at a small travel agency, mostly booking trips to Florida, Mexico, and a few dusty brochures for Greece or Spain that no one ever chose. But then, one summer, my manager gave me a surprise bonus trip to Florida, just a few days off-season, to experience the product. That's where I met David. He was staying at the same hotel. Confident, warm smile, sharp blue eyes, a laugh that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We had dinner once, then twice. We stayed up too late, shared too much, and promised to keep in touch when we returned home. We didn't just keep in touch. 3 months later, I was Mrs. Carter, and that was the last time I felt like I belonged to someone. Until the day I stood outside my bedroom door, listening to my husband and his mother plot how to erase me. David, and I didn't waste time. We got married at a little courthouse outside Lansing with just a few friends, no frills, no family. I didn't have anyone to invite, and his mother, well, she showed up in a beige suit and didn't smile once. At the time, I chalked it up to nerves. Or maybe grief. His dad had passed years ago, and I assumed she was still carrying that weight. But I was wrong. That look on her face wasn't grief. It was disapproval, and I didn't even have to do anything to earn it. Just existing, just loving her son, was enough to offend her. After the wedding, I moved into David's apartment. Or rather, I moved into their home. Marjorie had her own room down the hall, decorated in florals and old porcelain dolls that watched you while you walked. The place smelled like lavender and lemon pledge, and I kept telling myself it was just temporary, that we'd find our own place once things settled. But temporary turned into months, then years. She didn't shout. She didn't curse. but she had a way of speaking with silence that cut deeper than any insult. If I cooked dinner, she'd pick at it with a fork like it offended her. If I cleaned the living room, she'd sigh and redo it 10 minutes later. If I'd bought new sheets for our bed, she'd ask if they were on sale at a thrift store. The worst part, David never saw it. He kept saying, she just needs time, or that's just how she is, or she doesn't mean anything by it. But I knew better. Women like Marjorie didn't need to raise their voice. They ruled by making you feel small. I tried so hard in the beginning. I bought her gifts, remembered her birthdays, made her tea the way she liked. Black with lemon, no sugar. I even canceled a trip once because she had the flu and said she couldn't bear being alone. And for what? One night, I overheard her say to David, "There were decent girls in your circle, educated, with families. You had to bring home this stray." A stray. That word stayed with me. I asked David once, gently, if we could maybe look into getting our own place. Nothing fancy, just a little apartment where we could build something that felt like ours. He hesitated, then said, "I talked to Mom about that once. She got so upset she had chest pains. I can't risk that again." So that was it. Our marriage had a third wheel, and she was steering the whole car. I told myself it was okay, that I loved him enough to wait, that maybe one day he'd stand up for me the way I needed. But deep down, I knew better. Every time I looked at him, my David, the man who once held my face in his hands and said I was his whole world, I saw someone shrinking. Someone who loved comfort more than confrontation. Someone who would always choose peace over truth, even if it meant sacrificing me. Still, I stayed, because I didn't know where else to go. Because love makes you hold on long after it's safe. Because I'd survived worse, and a cold mother-in-law seemed like a small price for stability. Until the phone call, until the will, until everything changed. Until the moment I learned that someone who once abandoned me had also left me a way out. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. I was standing by the kitchen window, watering the tiny basil plant I kept in a chipped mug. Marjorie was napping. David was still at work. The apartment was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the old wall clock between each ring. "Hello." "Good afternoon. May I speak to Natalie Carter?" The voice said, formal, crisp, unfamiliar. "This is she. My name is Greg Franklin. I'm a probate attorney with Franklin and Hall in Lansing. I'm calling regarding a matter of inheritance." For a second, I thought it was a scam. Inheritance. I repeated, "There must be a mistake. I don't have any family." "That's why we'd prefer to speak in person," he said. "Are you available to come into the office this week? We can explain everything then." I hesitated. "Can you at least tell me who it's from?" "I'm afraid I can't over the phone, ma'am. But I assure you it's legitimate, and you'll want to hear this in person." "Right," I muttered, still half expecting him to ask for my social security number. I can come in Friday morning." "Perfect. 11 a.m. I'll send our address to your phone." "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood there holding the phone, heart racing. Inheritance? From whom? Grandma was long gone. Dad, too. I didn't even know any cousins. The only thing I'd ever inherited was trauma. I debated telling David and decided to wait. Not because I didn't trust him, at least not yet, but because I could already hear Marjorie's voice in my head. "Who's leaving things to you, Natalie? Some secret boyfriend? Did you fake your mother's death for sympathy points?" That night, after Marjorie had gone next door to play cards with her friend June, I sat David down at the kitchen table. "I need to talk to you about something," I said, trying to sound casual. He looked up from his phone, distracted. "Can it wait? I've had the longest day. It'll only take a minute." I told him about the call, about the attorney, about the appointment on Friday. His eyes widened. "Wait, someone left you something?" "I guess so. I mean, I have no idea who. Maybe it's a mistake. Or maybe it's real," he said, sitting up straighter. You know, some long-lost uncle or something. Stranger things have happened. Or maybe it's someone trying to stick me with a pile of debts, I said, half laughing. Don't people do that? Leave behind credit cards and lawsuits. David chuckled, then leaned forward. Well, either way, you should go. Just don't tell Mom yet. You know how she gets. I wasn't planning on it. Good, he said, nodding. Let's wait until you know more. Then he added, but if it turns out to be something big, we could finally start over. Maybe even move out of here. My heart fluttered. Really? Sure, he said, reaching for my hand. We've talked about it. Maybe this is our shot. It was the first time in months he'd said something that felt like a promise. For a moment, I believed him. I had no idea that just 3 days later, I'd find out the truth about who left me that inheritance, and what it would cost me to accept it. Friday morning, the sky was overcast, and the whole city felt like it was holding its breath. I stood outside the law office for a full minute before walking in. My hands were cold. My stomach kept flipping. It felt like something irreversible was about to happen, and maybe it was. The building smelled like new carpet and strong coffee. A young assistant led me down a narrow hallway to a private office, where a man in his 40s stood up and smiled. Mrs. Carter? I'm Greg Franklin. Please have a seat. I sat across from him, clutching my purse in my lap like a shield. He didn't waste time. Are you familiar with a woman named Linda Whitaker? The name hit me like a punch to the chest. That name. I hadn't heard it aloud in 20 years. That's my biological mother, I said slowly. Why? Mr. Franklin studied me for a moment. I'm sorry to tell you this, but Ms. Whitaker passed away 3 weeks ago. She named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate. I didn't know what to feel. Grief? Anger? Shock? I hadn't seen or heard from her since I was 8 years old. She never sent a card, never called, not even once. She left you a letter, he added, reaching into a file and pulling out a sealed envelope. I'll step out so you can read it privately. When you're ready, we'll talk details. He left me alone with it. Just me and the envelope, heavy with words from a ghost. I held it for a long time. My fingers trembled. A part of me wanted to rip it in half. Another part needed to know what it said, needed to hear why. So I opened it, and the scent hit me first, expensive perfume, faint but familiar. Then came the handwriting, looping and elegant. My dearest Natalie, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you'll understand why I left. I swallowed hard. I was young, foolish. Your father was drowning, and he was pulling me down with him. The drinking, the anger, it became too much. I didn't leave because of you. I left because I was afraid. Afraid of becoming a woman who screamed at her child the way he screamed at us. I stopped reading. The words blurred. I didn't take you with me because I had nowhere to go. And then things got worse. I trusted the wrong man. Ended up overseas, working in places no woman should ever work. But I survived. And one day, I was lucky enough to meet someone who saw me as more than my past. He married me. He gave me a new name, a new life. He passed 2 years ago, and now I'm alone again, but with something to give. You. I've built a small empire, hotels in Spain, Portugal, and Florida. I've left everything to you, not because I think it will make up for what I did, but because you deserve something good, something stable, something that's yours. I was crying now, silently soaking the paper with guilt and rage, and something else. Something I didn't have a name for. I kept your photo with me all those years. Even when I had nothing, I kept you close. You gave me the strength to survive things I'll never be able to describe. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But more than anything, I love you. Always. Mom, I sat there for a long time, staring at her name. She'd called herself Mom. Not Linda. Not Ms. Whitaker. Just Mom. When Mr. Franklin returned, he didn't speak. He simply placed a glass of water in front of me and waited. Is it real? I whispered. All of it. He nodded. The properties, the accounts, the letter. Yes. You're now the legal owner of one of the most valuable boutique hotel chains in Europe. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. I work at a travel agency that barely sells package deals to Disney World, I said. He smiled gently. Not anymore. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about myself, about my mother, about my life, shifted. The strange thing about life-changing moments is that they rarely arrive with warning. Sometimes they come dressed as errands or accidents. Mine came disguised as a forgotten folder. I'd meant to go straight to the office after the meeting at the attorney's. But halfway there, I realized I'd left an important document on the nightstand. I debated whether it was worth turning back. I wish I hadn't. David's car wasn't in the driveway when I pulled up. That should have been a relief. I wanted time to breathe, to process. But when I walked up the stairs and reached the apartment door, I heard voices, familiar ones. I paused. The front door was cracked just enough for sound to drift through. "Mom, we can't do that." That's insane," David was saying. His voice was low, tense. Marjorie's voice followed, cold and unbothered. "Why not?" "What? You'd rather let her run off with millions while we sit here in this tiny apartment eating leftovers. This is our chance." There was a pause. Then David muttered, "She's my wife." "No, she's your obstacle. You think she's going to keep sharing once she realizes she doesn't need us? Please. She'll take the money and disappear to Europe, and you'll be stuck here with nothing." "I don't care about the money," he said, but there was no conviction in it. "Then care about your future," Marjorie snapped. "You think she'll stay out of loyalty? She's already different. I saw it in her face when she walked in this morning. That girl is slipping away." I should have walked in right then, slammed the door, demanded answers, but I didn't move. I couldn't. "Besides," Marjorie continued, her voice dropping to a chilling calm, "I have a plan." "What kind of plan?" David asked warily. "We declare her mentally unfit. There are medications, people I know. A few weeks of the right behavior, and we can get her committed, just long enough for you to be granted power of attorney." David's silence was deafening. Finally, he whispered, "You've really thought this through." "I'm tired of scraping by, David," she hissed. "I've lived my whole life watching other people get what I deserved. For once, I want comfort. I want luxury. And this is our only chance to have it." There was another pause. Then, "Okay," he said quietly, "but just make sure she doesn't get hurt." I think something broke in me right then. Not a dramatic shatter. More like the slow, final crack of a window pane giving in after a storm. I backed away from the door, step by step, not breathing, not thinking until I was outside. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked to my car like a sleepwalker, sat behind the wheel, and stared at the dashboard for what felt like an hour. Everything hurt. But more than that, I felt stupid. I had married this man, defended his silence, cared for his mother like she was my own. I had sacrificed my boundaries, my comfort, my dreams for what? So they could drug me and take everything? So they could erase me? Eventually, I turned on the engine and drove. Not to the office. Not home. I didn't know where I was going, only that it had to be somewhere they weren't. I pulled over into a park lot and dialed the only person who made sense in that moment. "Sam," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Natalie, what's wrong?" I can't go home. Can I stay with you tonight?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "Come over. Now." As I drove toward her house, something inside me began to shift. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. I'd spent so many years trying to be someone they could accept, someone they might love, but they never would. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they didn't want to love me. I was just a means to an end. And now, I was done being useful. I wasn't going back. Sam opened the door before I even knocked. She didn't ask questions, just wrapped her arms around me and said, "You're safe here." Her house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent, familiar, warm, quiet. I didn't realize how tightly I'd been holding my breath until I finally exhaled in her living room. Curled up on her couch with a blanket and a mug of tea I couldn't quite drink. We didn't talk about it that night. Instead, she made spaghetti, put on an old sitcom, and sat next to me like it was just another lazy Friday. And maybe that's what I needed. Not sympathy, but space to stop unraveling. The next morning, I told her everything. About the will, the inheritance, the letter from my mother, and then the conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. When I finished, Sam sat still for a long moment, then finally said, "They're monsters." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. She always hated me. I just never thought he'd let her go that far. Sam's voice softened. "You need to disappear for a while. Not just from them. From all of it." I nodded. I was thinking the same. But I don't even know where to go. I don't have family. No place to fall back on. "You have me," she said. "And I know someone else who'd help." That's when she brought up Jim Walker. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. We grew up in the same village. Jim was the boy who shared his snacks with me at recess and walked me home when my dad was too drunk to remember I existed. We lost touch after high school, but I remembered his laugh and the way he always made me feel like I wasn't invisible. "I think he's still in town," Sam said. "Runs some kind of private security firm now." "I can't ask him for help." "Why not? He'd drop everything to help you. I'm sure of it." I didn't believe her until I made the call. His voice on the other end was older, deeper, but still unmistakably him. "Natalie," he said, sounding stunned. "Is that really you?" "Yeah, it's me." And then, without hesitation, "Where are you? What do you need? Tell me what happened." I didn't tell him everything, not over the phone, but I gave him enough. Enough to make him say, "You're staying with Sam? Good. I'm coming by this afternoon." When he arrived, it was like opening a window in a sealed room. Jim was calm, steady, and looked exactly like the kind of man you'd want in a storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, the same quiet confidence he always had. But now it came with experience. He'd built something with his life. He had direction. Control. He didn't ask for permission. He just said, "You're coming with me." "Jim, my place is outside the city. Big house. Privacy. Security. I've got people I trust. You'll be safe." I should have hesitated. I should have said I needed time. But I didn't. Because when someone finally reaches for your hand without asking why you're drowning, you take it. I packed what little I had, hugged Sam so tight she squeaked, and left everything behind, including my name on the mailbox. Jim's house sat on a quiet stretch of road surrounded by pine trees and open sky. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. It wasn't the size of the place or the way sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. It was the silence. No creaking footsteps from another room. No passive-aggressive sighs. No one watching me with narrowed eyes. Just stillness and safety. Jim had already arranged everything. A guest room made up, groceries in the fridge, even a spare phone in case I needed to go completely off-grid. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for some catch, some expectation. But there wasn't one. "I want you here," he said simply, standing in the doorway of the room that would be mine. "No strings. Just rest. We'll figure the rest out later." He assigned one of his senior security guys, Kyle Henderson, to shadow me during the day. Kyle was ex-military, polite, professional, and, at first, quietly reassuring. But something shifted after the second day. He lingered longer in the hallway, asked more personal questions, called me Nat like we were old friends. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then one evening, after Jim had stepped out, Kyle cornered me near the kitchen and said, "You know, people like Jim don't just help out of the goodness of their hearts. Guys like him, they always want something in return." I blinked. "Excuse me." "I'm just saying," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're not the only one with secrets." That night, I told Jim everything. He didn't hesitate. The next morning, Kyle was reassigned, quietly without drama. Jim never brought it up again, but I noticed he started driving me to work himself after that. Work, if you could call it that. I went back to the travel agency just to wrap things up, quietly give notice, and explain to my manager I'd be stepping down. I kept the story vague. Family changes, I said. She didn't press, but word travels fast. By the third day, David showed up outside the office. He was waiting by the door, looking pale and nervous. The moment he saw me, he rushed forward. "Natalie, please just talk to me." Jim stepped between us like a wall of calm steel. "She's not going anywhere with you." David looked him up and down, then at me. "So this is what it is now. You're running off with a bodyguard." I didn't flinch. "I'm not running. I'm rebuilding." He tried to grab my arm, but Jim was faster. He didn't hurt him, just blocked, firm and final. David stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe I was finally becoming someone he couldn't manipulate. Later that night, sitting on the porch swing at Jim's house, I asked, "Why are you doing all this for me?" Jim looked out at the trees. "Because you matter, and no one should feel hunted in their own life." I watched the sky fade from gold to blue and whispered, "I wish I'd known someone like you back then." He turned to me. "You did. You just forgot." But now I was remembering, and I was done forgetting who I really was. Days passed quietly at Jim's house. There were no fights, no tension, no one standing behind doors, whispering about how to control me. Just simple mornings, coffee on the porch, and the sound of wind through trees. It didn't take long before I started sleeping through the night again. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It arrives slowly, like breath returning to your lungs after you've been underwater too long. I helped around the house, cleaned, cooked, answered a few emails about my inheritance with a lawyer from Spain. Jim gave me space, but he never felt far. He didn't hover. He didn't press. But every time I looked over my shoulder, he was there, steady, patient, waiting like he had all the time in the world. One Saturday morning, he asked me to go for a drive. "Where?" I asked, already pulling on my jacket. "You'll see." He didn't say a word the whole way there. We turned down winding roads, past cornfields and sleepy barns, until we reached a narrow path that led to a secluded garden. There, nestled between two old oaks, stood a small wrought iron table. On it, a bouquet of wildflowers, a bottle of champagne, and two crystal flutes. I stopped walking. He turned to me, eyes soft. "This land used to belong to a family named the Whitfields. The man who owned it proposed to his wife right here, nearly 60 years ago." I swallowed. "It's beautiful." "It reminded me of you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, my heart caught. Inside was a ring. The ring. The one I'd once pointed out in a magazine when we were kids, joking that if anyone ever proposed to me, that was the one I'd say yes to. "You remembered?" "I never forgot," he said. "I loved you even then, but I was too scared to tell you." Tears welled up before I could stop them. "I thought you only saw me as your weird little friend," I whispered. Jim laughed gently. "You were never little. You were the strongest person I knew." He took a breath, then knelt. "Natalie Carter, will you stay here with me? Not because you need to, not because you're running, but because you want to." I didn't even look at the ring again. I looked at him, at the man who never once made me feel like I had to prove I was worthy of love. And I said yes. He stood, slipped the ring on my finger, and pulled me into his arms. We stayed like that, the wind rustling through the trees, the world finally quiet. That night, we sat on the back porch with blankets around our shoulders and talked about the future. I told him I wanted to live simply, run things remotely, stay close to Sam, build something real, slow hours. I want to raise children who never have to recover from their childhood, I said. Jim squeezed my hand. Then we'll do just that. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was home. I waited a few more days. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be calm when I said it. Then, one morning, I dialed David's number. He picked up on the second ring. Natalie. I'd like to finalize the divorce, I said. He didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing. I thought maybe you'd change your mind. I didn't. So that's it, he asked, his voice sharp. You get rich, and suddenly I'm disposable. I laughed quietly. No, I was disposable long before I had anything. You just proved it. You're being dramatic, he snapped. I made a mistake, okay? I didn't actually do anything to you. You didn't have to, I said. Standing by while someone plans to destroy me is enough. There was silence. Then he said something I should have expected, but still made my skin crawl. What if something happens to you in Spain? A plane crash or something? Do you even have a will? I closed my eyes. Actually, I do now. And if anything ever happens to me, everything goes to charity. So no, David, you won't get a cent. You're really doing this, he muttered. Yes. Tomorrow. Local courthouse. Noon. I hung up before he could say anything else. The next day, he showed up, sullen, bitter, but on time. The paperwork took 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't even look at him until the very end. I used to love you, he said. I know, I replied. And maybe I used to love you too. But that version of me is gone. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. Jim was waiting in the car. When I opened the door, he didn't ask what happened. He just looked at me and smiled. You ready? I've never been more ready. Later that week, I went back to the apartment one last time to pick up the few things I still wanted. Marjorie wasn't there. The silence was suffocating but clean, like a room aired out after years of being sealed shut. I didn't take much. A box of letters from Grandma, a faded photo of me as a child. Nothing else was mine anymore. Back at Jim's, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip below the trees. I placed a hand on my belly, felt the smallest flutter, and smiled. This child would never feel abandoned, would never be made to beg for love. They would grow up knowing the difference between loyalty and control, between family and possession. I promise, I whispered, you will never wonder if you're enough. Because I already did that for the both of us.